Some dude took home this 400-year-old tree stump. Then he revealed what he was really doing with it. Most of the time, people don't voluntarily bring centuries-old rotting tree stumps into their homes. Unless, that is, they're anything like Brent Graham, who decided that doing so would actually be a great idea. Fortunately, however, he had great plans for the 400-year-old stump, and the results of his handiwork are simply stunning. Normally, you'd pay good money to get tree stumps removed. After all, a rotting stump can grow root diseases and affect other nearby flora, not to mention the irritating and unsightly shoots that grow off from its roots. However, rather than removing and disposing of the stump altogether, one man had his own ideas. Graham resides in Torrance, California, with his partner and daughter. He has a particular passion for working with his hands, as evidenced through his Instagram account and personal website. Indeed, they both display various projects he's completed in his workshop over the years, from an acoustic guitar to a word clock. The notion of upcycling has boomed in popularity over the past decade or so, particularly in the US. By definition, it's simply about taking something that might be considered waste or an unusable object or material and turning it into something new. For instance, Gary Chan, a Hong Kong-based inventor, salvages material from couches, tires, and wardrobes to create bicycles. And in the same vein, there's been a blossoming trend of people creating unique pieces of furniture for their homes all by themselves. That way they can avoid breaking the bank by paying for expensive furniture at a store. After all, materials often come much cheaper, or as in Graham's case, they sometimes come gratis. Indeed, the tree stump in question belonged to one of Graham's clients, who told the handyman that its destiny was simply to rot away in his garden. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough room in his home to make good use of it, so he offered it to Graham, who instantly agreed to take it off his hands. It was little wonder the customer couldn't fit it in his house, however. After all, the stump was absolutely enormous, to the point that Graham had trouble fitting it inside his van to transport it to his workshop. And while part of the stump had indeed rotted away, it wasn't completely derelict. Yes, somebody somewhere had, at some point, tried to salvage it. While the stump had a rotted away section in the center, someone had chiseled away at it, smoothing it out into a more attractive pattern. The sides of the stump, meanwhile, had been completely stripped of bark, and it didn't take long for Graham to realize he could make use of the stump as a coffee table in his home. So he made a plan and got to work. He began treating the wood by sanding it down and wetting it, at which point the detail in the grain began to show through. Graham was then able to properly count the rings in the grain to determine the tree's age, and he quickly realized it was around 4 centuries old. He also guessed that it had come from a Douglas fir tree due to its distinctive smell. Then Graham began flattening out the stump using a hand router, a particularly versatile tool used in woodworking. Unfortunately, as he was doing so, he slipped and cut a delve crevice into the top of the stump that would need to be rectified later in the process. He also figured out a way to use even the rotted cut-away section in the center of the stump. Indeed, Graham planned to cover it up with a piece of colored glass, giving the impression that it was a lake. And to do so, he had to draw up a coastline around the shape of the impasse, following the natural grain of the wood. Once he'd mapped out the shape he needed for the glass, he transferred his drawing to a digital file. Then he had his design created using a water jet cutter, which uses an extraordinarily high-pressure jet of water to slice through strong materials. Meanwhile, he also had the pattern cut into particle board to give him a template for creating a recessed area in the stump to lay the glass. At this point, the project was really starting to come together. With the top sanded out and smoothed, the wood wetted, and the glass cut to shape, Graham could finally properly visualize the finished table. But there was still some way to go, not least thanks to the gouge he'd accidentally made while routing. Fortunately, his experience with previous projects helped massively in this regard. In fact, he even used a leftover slab of walnut from his word clock to fill the imprint he'd created during the routing process, as seen in this picture here. And he employed the same trick for another area of the top that had rotted away. Finally, with all the blemishes sorted, Graham could move on to the finishing touches. First, he applied a coat of armor seal satin, which he simply applied with a wet shirt. "If I had heard of this stuff earlier, I'd have used it on so many projects," he wrote on Imgur. As the tree stump's new destiny was to become a coffee table, it needed raising slightly from its original 16-inch height. So Graham added 4 feet to its base, raising it another 2.5 inches to make it more practical for use in his home. After applying another 2 coats of finish, Graham began sanding down the wood around the glass so they'd sit flush with each other. Of course, this was a particularly intricate part of the entire process, as he could have easily damaged the carefully cut glass with just the slightest mistake. At last then, the table was finished. During its construction, Graham had settled on naming it the Caldera Lake Table, and then he uploaded images of the entire process from start to finish to Imgur and Reddit, where they quickly went viral. Seeing just how far the centuries-old tree stump came, however, it's no surprise it was so popular. Absolutely beautiful. The brass sailboat in the last photo is the perfect touch. This table is so wholesome, wrote one Reddit user. Indeed, Graham wasn't short of praise for his work, with another user commenting, "Super impressive. I love how you transform the rotted section into the nicest aspect and most distinctive element of the whole table." Bringing a 400-year-old tree stump into your home isn't most people's idea of a good time, but it clearly worked out perfectly for Brent Graham. So while it may not occur to most people to upcycle nature in this way, there's no denying that the results can be absolutely fantastic, as long as you have the know-how to pull it off. Check out these other videos from Let Me Know. If you haven't made the move to subscribe to our channel, all you need to do is click on that red subscribe button. Thank you for watching.